I feel like my list of favourite Ninjago villains looks very different to how a lot of Ninjago fans would rank the franchise's antagonists. One of the main ways in which my opinions on this topic differ from the rest of the fanbase is my belief that the Mechanic is one of Ninjago's greatest villains. Look, here's a bunch of villain names on screen now that I think the Mechanic is a better character than. Not out of malice towards these characters or a belief that most of Ninjago's villains aren't good, which isn't true. I just think the Mechanic is a genuinely great character and ranks amongst some of Ninjago's best antagonists. I feel like a lot of people just dismiss the Mechanic as being just some guy in order to downplay the character and his importance, but I think being just some ordinary guy is the Mechanic's greatest strength as a character. His story is one of rags to riches and finding success out of nothing, and the Ninjago series does a really good job at slowly building up to that. So, let's start with the Mechanic's introduction. Masters of Spinjitzu episode 57, Encrypted. This episode introduces the Mechanic as a disgruntled underling of Master Chen, who went out of business after the collapse of Chen's criminal empire in Season 4. The keyword there being underling. The Mechanic's central gimmick in this episode is being completely unnoteworthy. The ninja, particularly Cole, even call him irrelevant in the episode itself.
We're dealing with first tier bad guys here. You're 5th tier, maybe 4th tier tops.
4th tier?
In Skybound, the Mechanic is a purely joke character that everyone pokes fun at for being irrelevant.
Irrelevant!
And if Skybound was the only season the Mechanic was ever going to appear in, this is all the Mechanic would ever amount to being. The Ninjago producers had very different plans in store for the Mechanic, however.
Off the press! The Mechanic is back, Ninjago!
Plans that would begin to take root in seasons 8 and 11 of the original Ninjago show, where the producers of Ninjago would occasionally inject a small scene here and there into the show, giving viewers a look into what the Mechanic has been getting up to. These scenes are good because they show the viewer that the Mechanic has an actual presence in the world of Ninjago, just beyond being an irrelevant joke of a villain. They show him doing stuff like getting into fights with the ninja and forming relationships with other criminals in the Ninjago world. Just doing little bits here and there to give him an actual presence, which would all amount to what Season 12 Prime Empire had in store for the character. Now, for all of the flack that I've given Prime Empire over the years, one thing that I can't deny is that for the most part, the season and its shorts did the Mechanic wonders. One of my favorite things Prime Empire did for the Mechanic is giving him his very own short, called Upgrade. I feel like a lot of people kind of don't remember the Prime Empire shorts exist, so if you haven't watched this, you definitely should because it's really good. I'll put a link to the Mechanic one in the description. This short fleshes out a bunch of stuff about the Mechanic's character, including what he gets up to in his spare time or how he feels about his prosthetic arm. In this short, we see the Mechanic express discontent about his lack of an ability to feel things in his left arm, like he was able to before his arm was replaced with a prosthetic. Because of this, it can be thoroughly assumed that the Mechanic didn't actually want to have this prosthetic arm, that it was maybe lost in some kind of accident or tragic circumstance. Either that or he willingly gave up his biological left arm in favor of a mechanical one, but ended up having regrets about it and would go on to miss the feeling of touch he got in his left arm. I can't say which of these two interpretations of this short is the correct one, but either way makes the Mechanic in this short a pretty compelling and sympathetic character. On top of that, the Mechanic specifically emphasizing that it's not enough to just have a bunch of gadgets on his arm tells me that the gadgets served as an emotional crutch for the Mechanic's lack of an ability to feel things. Losing a limb stinks. Seeing the Mechanic try to emotionally deal with that added a lot of depth to the character for me. And Unagami giving the prosthetic arm the ability to feel in the short is such a good justification for the Mechanic's complete devoted loyalty to Unagami in the actual Prime Empire season, which he's absolutely spectacular in, by the way. This season really puts on display what a charismatic and entertaining villain this guy is. I think a particularly great moment in the episode Would You Like to Enter Prime Empire is this small moment here that perfectly encapsulates the character of the Mechanic for me.
He is suspected in 36 unsolved criminal cases.
37.
The Mechanic is unapologetically a dick, and I think that's absolutely great. What makes this character so entertaining so much of the time for me is how much he absolutely loves his line of work. In every scene he's in, you can see him brimming with enthusiasm to commit a felony. It's awesome.
That would destroy me!
Oh, heavens to Betsy! We better not do it then. Just kidding. Hook him up!
Not only does he have the perfect amount of enthusiasm to be a villain, he also has the skills to back that up. Over the course of the series, and particularly in the Worldbrain seasons, Mechanic makes wonderfully creative use of his robot arm and giant menagerie of various gadgets and stuff to be able to stand toe-to-toe with the ninja who once dismissed him as a joke. And at points gets even 4v1'd by the original 4 ninja and absolutely bodies them, Keep in mind, the mechanic is meant to be a secondary antagonist, and yet a lot of his feats are comparable to primary villains in this show. Also, oh my god, the noodle truck of crime. So, during Chen's criminal empire, his henchmen used noodle trucks to covertly deliver illegal materials and further Chen's plans. After Chen went out of business, the mechanic was left with this useless hunk of junk noodle delivery van. So, he did what any normal and rational person would do and absolutely tricked it out and turned it into an impenetrable tank, kitted with giant Doc-Ock arms that he'd go around and commit crime sprees in.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
The events of Prime Empire also play into the mechanic's character development, which is another thing I really like about him. You see, so many Ninjago villains come into power out of absolute nowhere and already have so many advantages on the ninja from the get-go. The mechanic differs from this in the sense that he has to work for everything he has, and we the viewer see that progression up the criminal hierarchy over the course of the series. After the events of Prime Empire, where the mechanic unleashed Unogami and caused a bunch of chaos in Ninjago, his influence in Ninjago's criminal world absolutely shot up into the stratosphere, causing him to be looked at in the same vein as actual villains like Asphera and Pythor and such. Even Cole, the character who at the start of the mechanic's journey dismissed him as a complete joke of a villain, acknowledges how far he's come.
He was small time, but he leveled up in my book since the whole Prime Empire thing.
The mechanic is a character who advanced up the criminal hierarchy so much that he went from being a complete joke of a villain who was scoffed at by anyone important to being a legitimate threat, so skilled that the Overlord himself recruited him. I love this aspect of the mechanic's role in Crystallized. His recruitment onto the Council of the Crystal King fully cements how influential of a villain he became over the course of the show. And seeing him fight alongside mainstay Ninjago villains such as Pythor, Vangelis, and the Overlord himself was such a satisfying payoff to his rise up the ranks over the course of the series. In my opinion, the mechanic was the only one of the returning villains that Crystallized did anything good with. While the rest just felt tacked on for the sake of nostalgia and calling back to better older seasons, the mechanic being recruited for such a high-profile villain team genuinely completed and rounded out his character arc for me. However, like with everything, Crystallized got him in the end. Leading up to the last 20 episodes of Crystallized, the mechanic is great and a highlight of the season. Then he starts interacting with Nia, and it all gets derailed. Remember how throughout this video I've told you about the mechanic's whole character arc of becoming a highly influential villain out of absolutely nothing? No elemental powers, no birthrights, just exclusively his own skill, ingenuity, and drive to become influential. After all that, after the Ninjago show already passed the finish line with the mechanic's character arc, he suddenly gets hung up on birthrights and elemental powers.
What?!
His interactions with Nia in the final 10 episodes of Crystallized are absolutely dreadful. Beyond all of this stuff being used to put down the character of Nia for no reason, and the fact that the mechanic is never proven wrong in his beliefs about Nia, which is an issue for a whole other discussion, so I won't get into it too much. But my issue here is how the mechanic absolutely fixates on the idea of Nia being useless without her biological elemental powers. Given how the mechanic is the representation of regular people being able to do insane stuff, this sudden out-of-nowhere line of thinking is a complete betrayal of the mechanic's character and everything he represents in Ninjago's storyline. I would understand if someone like Vangelis was telling Nia these things, but it's just not in line with the mechanic's character at all. I get that the mechanic is supposed to be the villain and he's meant to be saying these kinds of bad and hurtful things to put the ninja down, but it's not in character for him to say this, I'm sorry. Thankfully though, Dragon's Rising descended from the heavens and fixed all of my problems with the mechanic's character here. In the short, the Mech Master, the mechanic makes his grand return into the new Ninjago show, and his characterization here is absolutely chef's kiss. In the short, he comes head to head with an elemental master, Sora, and starts saying things to put her down and demotivate her. Sound familiar? The difference here is the things he says are absolutely in line with the character this time.
Tech powers, huh? Ha! I don't need elemental power to be a master of technology!
This, comparatively, is an awesome taunt. Rather than implying that the mechanic believes that biological powers is what makes someone, here he's taunting Sora for having every biological advantage she possibly could have against him, and still being outclassed. It is wonderfully in line with the mechanic's character. This is how you have him taunt an elemental master, not that. Seeing that his rise to power and ability to compete with the likes of the ninja over the course of the original series has given him a sense of superiority over others is such a great addition to the character, and doubles as a really cool character flaw for the mechanic as well, because his inflated confidence here is what ultimately causes him to let his guard down and allow Sora to win. This Dragon's Rising short is absolutely great and fixes basically all of the problems introduced to the mechanic's character and Crystallized. And yeah, that's where we're at in terms of the mechanic nowadays. Over the course of his 8-year-long saga over Ninjago's run, he went from being a dumb, loser, joke of a villain to being one of the most dangerous villains in Ninjago history. He's an incredibly dumb, fun, and entertaining villain, whilst also having a tinge of sympathy to his character. The Mechanic is an absolutely fantastic character, and through a wonderful addition to Ninjago's canon. And I hope this video has done a good job at conveying to you all why he's one of my favourite Ninjago villains ever.